History is filled with tyrants, but few can match the story of Sparta's final king. He was a man so cruel, so creative in his sadism, that he built one of history's first and most terrifying robots, a torture machine designed in the perfect image of his own wife. This mechanical monster, known as the Apega of Nabis, was the perfect symbol for his reign, a beautiful facade hiding a heart of cold, piercing iron. But this isn't just a story about a man and his monstrous invention. The way his reign ended is even more shocking. It's a tale of shifting loyalties, desperate gambles, and the ultimate betrayal. It's the story of how a tyrant who mastered the art of deception was destroyed by deception itself, killed not by his enemies, but by the very allies he trusted to save him. This is the story of Nabis and the violent, brutal end of independent Sparta. Imagine you're a wealthy citizen in Sparta, and you've been invited to a private audience with the king. His name is Nabis, and his reputation for cruelty is known across Greece. He greets you with a smile that doesn't quite reach his eyes and starts talking about the needs of the state and the generous contributions required to maintain it. You know it's extortion, and you politely refuse. Nabis's smile widens. "Perhaps you won't negotiate with me," he says, "but you must discuss it with my wife, Apega." He gestures to a stately figure seated at the end of the room. As you approach, the figure rises. You reach out a hand, but Nabis himself steps in, puts his hands on your back, and pushes you into an embrace with his queen. And then the horror begins. The automaton's arms wrap around you, and from beneath its fine clothes, dozens of iron nails press into your flesh. The hug tightens with every denial, a gruesome squeeze designed to crush you until you surrender every last coin, or until it takes your life. This was the Apega of Nabis, an iron fist in a velvet glove. But how did a king of the legendary Spartans, a society famous for its honor, come to rely on such horrific methods? To understand the monster, you have to understand the decaying world that created him. By the late 3rd century BC, the Sparta of legend was a ghost. The powerhouse that had defied the Persian Empire was gone. Its warrior class, the Spartiates, had dwindled to just a few hundred men, thanks to constant war and a rigid social system that wouldn't adapt. A few powerful families held all the wealth, while the masses, including the serf-like helots, had no power and no hope. Sparta was a hollowed-out shell. This is the world that gave birth to Nabis. In 207 BC, he seized power in a coup, claiming to be a descendant of an ancient royal line, a useful claim when the true heirs were gone. But Nabis wasn't a traditionalist. He saw the rot at Sparta's core and knew that to restore its power, he had to shatter its old structures. He wasn't just a king, he was a revolutionary. His reforms were swift and brutal. He purged the last surviving members of Sparta's old royal houses to make sure no one could challenge his claim. Wealthy aristocrats who opposed him were exiled or executed, their lands seized. Then he took his most radical step. He freed thousands of helots, the enslaved people who had served Sparta for centuries, and gave them full citizenship. He gave them the land he'd taken from the rich, and in a calculated move of social engineering, forced the wives and daughters of the exiled elites to marry his new citizens. To the old guard, and to outside historians like Polybius, who came from a rival city, Nabis was a bloodthirsty tyrant, tearing down a sacred order. Polybius is our main source on Nabis, and he didn't pull any punches, calling him the tyrant of the Lacedaemonians. But to the thousands of newly freed helots and the poor, Nabis might have looked like a liberator. He broke the chains of centuries-old oppression and gave them a stake in Sparta's future. His actions, while undeniably cruel, were also a desperate, pragmatic attempt to solve Sparta's biggest problem, its catastrophic lack of soldiers. By creating thousands of new citizens loyal only to him, he rebuilt Sparta's army, fortified the city for the first time in its history, and built a navy. He was trying to drag Sparta, kicking and screaming, into the modern age. But this revolution was built on blood and fear, and the methods he used to fund it would cement his dark legacy forever. Revolutions are expensive. A new army, a navy, and foreign mercenaries all require a constant flow of cash. The fortunes Nabis seized from the old aristocracy weren't enough. This need for money became the mother of his most infamous invention. His methods of extortion were ruthless. His main targets were the remaining rich citizens who had survived his initial purge. And this is where the Apega of Nabis comes back into the story. The historian Polybius gives a chillingly detailed account of the device, describing it as a life-sized replica of Nabis's wife, Queen Apega, a formidable woman known for her own greed and cruelty. Now, did this terrifying robot wife actually exist? Polybius swears it did, but some modern historians are skeptical, suggesting it might just be a powerful metaphor for Nabis's cruelty. But whether the threat was a mechanical monster or just good old-fashioned torture, the fear was very real. Nabis perfected the art of extortion. His terror wasn't confined to a torture chamber. He set up a network of spies and assassins that reached far beyond Sparta. For the wealthy exiles, there was no safe place to hide. Polybius tells stories of Nabis's agents hunting his enemies down, renting houses next to theirs, and then breaking through the walls or shooting through windows to kill them while they slept. This campaign of terror ensured that, as Polybius put it, for the unhappy Spartans there was no place to fly to and no moment at which their lives were safe. He had transformed Sparta and revived its military, but he ruled a kingdom built on fear, surrounded by enemies. On one hand, he was a populist reformer, on the other, a paranoid tyrant. This made Sparta just strong enough to be a threat, but also isolated and hated. As the great powers of the Mediterranean, Rome and Macedon, fought for control of Greece, Nabis was about to become a pawn in a much bigger game. Nabis's revitalized Sparta was aggressive, but it didn't exist in a bubble. The Greek world was a chessboard dominated by Macedon in the north, the Achaean League, Sparta's old rival, and the rising superpower of Rome. Nabis, ever the opportunist, played them all against each other. At first, he sided with Philip V of Macedon, who rewarded him with control of the city of Argos. Nabis immediately brought his reforms to Argos, booting out the rich and redistributing their wealth. But when it looked like Rome was going to win the war against Philip, Nabis did what he did best. He switched sides. He betrayed his Macedonian allies and joined the Roman camp, hoping to keep his kingdom and his new city. For a while, it worked. Rome was busy with bigger fish. Once the war was over, however, Nabis's enemies, especially the Achaean League, saw their chance. They complained to the Roman general Flamininus that the tyrant of Sparta was a threat to the free Greece Rome claimed to be building. Flamininus demanded Nabis give up Argos. Nabis refused. This led to the war against Nabis in 195 BC. A huge Roman and Achaean army crushed Nabis's forces, captured his port, and besieged Sparta itself. Nabis was defeated and forced to accept humiliating terms. He lost Argos, his coastal cities, and had to pay a massive fine. His kingdom was now just Sparta and its immediate farmland. But Nabis wasn't done. A few years later, he tried to retake his lost territory, only to be beaten back again by the brilliant Achaean general Philopoemen. Now he was truly cornered. His treasury was empty, his enemies were united, and he was desperate. This desperation led to his final fatal decision. He needed a powerful ally, one that also hated Rome and the Achaeans. He found one in the Aetolian League, a fierce confederation from central Greece. Nabis begged them for troops to help protect what was left of his kingdom. The Aetolians agreed and sent 1,000 soldiers under a commander named Alexamenus. For Nabis, these soldiers were his last hope. He had no idea he was welcoming his own executioners. The story of Nabis is a stark reminder that in the ancient world, Power was a dangerous game, and betrayal was just another move on the board. If you love these wild stories of ambition and treachery, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell because we dive into the most dramatic moments from history every week. The year is 192 BC. The Aetolian soldiers are in Sparta, welcomed as saviors. Their presence gives Nabis a new surge of confidence. With these allies, he can drill his army and prepare for the next round in his endless fight for survival. The final act takes place on a field just outside the city. Nabis decides to hold a military review. He rides out onto the plain, surrounded by his personal guard and the top Aetolian cavalry. Among them is their commander, Alexamenus, and a select group of about 30 conspirators. Their secret mission wasn't to help Nabis, but to kill him and seize Sparta for the Aetolian League. As Nabis rides through the ranks, inspecting his men, he is completely unsuspecting. These are his allies, his guests. He's in his element. The Aetolian plotters just wait for the right moment. Then, it happens. In a flash of shocking violence, Alexamenus gives the signal and charges the king. At the same time, the other conspirators wheel their horses and converge on the stunned Nabis. He has no time to react. A spear from Alexamenus knocks him from his horse. Before he can get up, before his own guards can even process the betrayal, the Aetolians are on him, a flurry of swords and spears raining down. The man who lived by paranoia and assassination dies in broad daylight, murdered by the men he had chosen as his protectors. Chaos erupts. The Spartan army watches in horror as their king is butchered. The Aetolians, their bloody work done, race into Sparta, making for the palace. They start to loot and plunder, thinking the city is theirs. But they fatally underestimated the Spartans. The shock of the murder quickly turns to pure rage. The citizens, many of whom owed their freedom to the very tyrant they just saw slain, rally together. They might have feared Nabis, but they would not hand their city over to foreign traitors. A fierce street battle breaks out. The Spartans, fighting with furious desperation, overwhelm the assassins. They hunt them down through the alleys of their ancient city and, in a brutal act of vengeance, slaughter them all. The immediate threat is gone, but the damage is done. Nabis is dead. In the chaos, the Achaean League, led by Nabis's old rival Philopoemen, sees its opening. With Sparta leaderless, Philopoemen marches his army into the city without a fight. The story of independent Sparta, which spanned centuries of glory and war, ends not with a bang, but with a quiet absorption into the lands of its oldest rival. The skinning of Nabis was complete. His power, his kingdom, and his life all stripped away. With the death of Nabis, Sparta's long history as an independent power was over. Forced into the Achaean League, its unique society was dismantled. A few decades later, all of Greece would fall under Roman rule, and Sparta would become just another provincial city in a vast empire. So what are we to make of Nabis? Was he the bloodthirsty monster Polybius described, a tyrant with a macabre torture robot? The evidence for his cruelty is hard to deny. Or was he a radical reformer doing whatever it took to save his dying nation? Freeing the Helots was a revolutionary act in a desperate bid for survival. Perhaps the most fitting lesson is the irony of his death. Nabis was a master of betrayal. He built a machine of deception in the image of his own wife, yet in the end he was destroyed not by the enemies he knew, but by the allies he invited into his home. The tyrant who lived by the sword of deceit died by it, and with him died the last breath of an independent Sparta. His story is a brutal reminder that in the unforgiving game of power, trust is the most dangerous gamble of all. So, what do you think? Was Nabis a visionary reformer trying to save Sparta, or just a monster who got what he deserved? Let us know in the comments below.